and risk to missions. And as we look forward over the life cycle of this budget and beyond into the FIDEP, we're always looking at the evolution of those operational plans and then the decision points along the way to make sure that we can match the combat capability and capacity required to achieve the desired effects that are baked within those operational plans across the COCOMs. And I commend the Army, who's looking closely at the two platforms that you're most interested through your line of questioning, and the work that Undersecretary Obadal has been doing to look at rotary wing lift requirements as we move to the future. But in the end, we have to have mobility on the battlefield. It has to be survivable in the conflicts and engagements that we'll have, and so we remain very closely focused on those requirements.
I appreciate that, and my only concern is not whether modernization is important, but I understand with some of those efforts that we are looking for a future date is next year, the year after, so forth, because it's not been fielded. But what we need to take a look at, and I think you understand this, is whether the department is managing this transition in a responsible way. In my view, what we cannot afford to do is to create a near-term aviation gap. We weaken the supplier base and then ask the Congress to come back and rebuild that capability and that capacity at a greater cost. Because when you destroy the infrastructure, it's very, very difficult to bring that back and the skilled workforce that it takes to deal with that. So very clearly this information, and if you can supply this to our committee, would be very, very helpful in our moving forward. I yield back, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, John Leiter. Mr. Womack.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You thread a very difficult needle in that, and there's been a lot of comments made, and I associate myself with a lot of these comments on the fact that here we are trying to figure out a base budget at the same time of a supplemental and at the same time talking about reconciliation in order to be able to meet the needs of the joint force going forward. And my friend, the ranking member of the full committee, talks about capability gaps. When you have to do it this way because of the lack of certainty and the political dynamics around this dais and of course throughout Congress, there are going to be gaps in capability. Is that correct, Mr. Secretary?
I mean, we do everything we can to try to minimize that by planning what could play off against something else, but inevitably there are places where we have to make adjustments. You're right, sir.
I want to get somewhat parochial here for just a minute on the subject of our reserve component. And this question would be for General Kane. Last month, 22 adjutants general, all of those who command fighter units in their state, signed a letter to Congress calling for multi-year procurement authority to buy between 72 and 100 new fighters annually. 13 of 24 fighter units lack recapitalization plans. On the Army side, all of our states suffer from a lack of reimbursement for responding to the call of their communities. Between fiscal 20 and fiscal 24, over $71 million was paid by states to the Guard, but the Guard never saw that reimbursement. As you may know, any non-federal entity reimbursing a federal entity causes the funding to go to the Treasury, and NGB never sees that reimbursement. Our Guard is paying to respond to a disaster out of O&M funds, then having to pay more to maintain it. As the primary combat reserve for our active force, the Guard continues to play an outsized role in the nation's defense. In fact, General Nordhaus recently said that our National Guardsmen are fully integrated as part of the joint force in Operation Epic Fury. So here's my point. The Guard and Reserve are being asked to do more. Epic Fury, Midnight Hammer, border security missions, domestic deployments, and the many all-hazard responses across the 54. They are as much in the fight as the regular component. So, what is the department's plan to ensure that the Guard and Reserve are recapitalized, maintained, and reimbursed at a pace consistent with their operational role in the national defense strategy?
Sure. I'm assuming that question's coming to me since you're looking at me.
You would be correct.
Yeah, yes, sir. Thank you, sir. As a member of the Guard, a proud member of the Guard, I'm mindful that every day when you mobilize the Guard, you mobilize the United States people. And they are now much more than a tactical reserve. They're a strategic reserve. The decisions on recapping the fighter community live obviously within our civilian leadership, but the requirements that they're out there getting after every day, as you alluded to, sir, are substantive and long lasting beyond just the Title 32 force. What I'm always inspired by is the professionalism of the Guard and the reserves, who get more out of an airplane than one might think. I mean, I go out there to Andrews often and still get to fly, and my crew chiefs are master sergeants and senior master sergeants who've been on a particular airplane for a long, long time. So they'll continue to extend that capability due to the professionalism that they have. It doesn't mean we don't have to take a hard look at recap and make sure that the 4th generation airplanes are on a pathway to 5th and 6th gen as the department continues to look at what we're solving for.
Mr. Chairman, if we have another round of questions, I'll come back with another, because my next question is probably not going to yield me enough time, and I'll yield back the balance.
Mr. Cuellar.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member, Mr. Secretary, all of y'all. Thank you and all the men and women. Thank you for your service. I want to ask you about the Western Hemisphere. I want to talk to you about Mexico and then the border. First of all, thank you for the work that y'all are doing in the Western Hemisphere. I've always said that we're looking at other parts of the world. We have to look at our own backyard, and we got to make sure that the Western Hemisphere is working with us. So thank you for that. Anything y'all want to add to the work that y'all doing there, I would ask you to talk to us a little bit about it. Mexico is the other one, very important partner of us. Congressman Michael McCall and myself were down there. We pushed for the Special Operation Forces, SEAL, to do training exercises. And for the first time, we actually have military forces in Mexico, which is very unique. And again, congratulations on that. If you can tell us what they're doing, and we need to see more of that. We also have, talking about the Guard also, we have I believe the California Guard is now for the first time a partnership with Mexico. We've been pushing, I've been pushing Texas, but California got there before we did, but that's good. And talk a little bit about that. Also on the border, I want to thank you and the men and women of Joint Task Force Southern Border for the work that they're doing on the homeland. They're in my area, Laredo and other places. But I want to draw your attention to one particular threat, that is the accelerating demands. The cartels are not only watching what's happening in Ukraine, but they're learning from it. And we're hearing from credible reports about cartels looking at fiber optic drone systems. And we all know what that is. And my question is, what is the department doing to get ahead of this threat? How are you investing in the counter UAS capabilities to defeat fiber optics drone systems? And what lessons are we learning from what's happening? You know, the procurement, the bureaucrats, without due respect, it takes a long time to get our systems. Over there, the cartels, they got the money. They don't have to go through a procurement system. They'll just buy the drones, and they're out manning us on the Mexican side along the border. So thank you. And if you can address that, or the chairman also.
Well, thank you, Congressman. I very much appreciate your efforts in this realm for a very long time. And I think you see in the national security strategy, the national defense strategy, Western Hem and Homeland is priority number one. We may pace to the ability on the first island chain, but priority number one is here. And you've seen it through America's Counter Cartel Coalition and getting after the designated terrorist organizations that are trafficking drugs and humans into the United States, something you've been talking a lot about. And that's the beginning of our defense in depth. It starts down there where they produce and where they move. Then into Mexico, where we have had an unprecedented amount of partnership, and we appreciate that. We would encourage Defensa and Marina to continue where they can to partner and do more. That's the expectation of the United States government, of the Mexican government, is step up so that we don't have to. And then sealing that southwest border, is the defense of the American people. It's the defense of the homeland. And when you talk to the troops that are down there doing that, they're proud of it. We also have multiple national defense areas there, which are controlled by DOW, where we can do rapid testing on counter UAS, JIATA 401 capabilities. So we're using those places to streamline the process by which we see what the cartels are trying to do and get after it with new capabilities that we can then field elsewhere, also learning from Ukraine in the process. I would defer to the chairman.
Sir, I'll just add a few things onto this. It's the Russia-Ukraine lessons learned and the application of those lessons by other actors like cartels is one we're focused a lot on. It's going to require a whole of government effort. As the Secretary mentioned, we do have Joint Interagency Task Force 401 led by an incredible Army one-star Brigadier General Matt Ross, who's focused solely in a chairman's controlled activity. So 401 reports up to me and in turn then to the Secretary to make sure that we're entrepreneurially looking at how to sense, see, detect, and defeat the range of small UAS threats. General Ross was just out in CENTCOM looking at some of the challenges that they're having over there. It'll continue to be an area of significant focus for the Joint Force, sir.
Well, my time is up, but I want to ask you to continue working with Mexico. You do have unprecedented partnerships, but the more we can push them, they're allies. There's a historical sensitivity. We know why, but the more you can push them to get them to work with us, that would be great. Thank you so much for all of y'all.
Thank you, gentlemen. Chairman Rogers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Secretary Hegseth, General Kane, Mr. Hurst, thank you for being here. And thank you, more importantly, for your service to the country. The 2026 National Defense Strategy makes clear that China is the pacing challenge. And this budget request puts real resources behind that nomenclature, including $11.7 billion for the Pacific Deterrence Initiative. My concern is that we're not just competing against China's military capability. We're competing against the speed at which China can build, replace, and influence. Where are some capability gaps when it comes to a potential conflict with the PRC? And General Kane, how will your priorities posture the joint force to close those gaps?
Chairman, thanks for the question. The speed at their production capability is one of the reasons why I'm grateful for the full team's partnership on speeding up the U.S. defense industrial base efforts, as well as the national industrial base efforts. And I'd really like to thank those mom and pop machine shops and second, third, fourth tier suppliers that live in all of your districts who are also increasing speed and capability without losing quality across the entirety of our manufacturing system. And it's going to require all of that. When we look at the range of capabilities that we must have to be properly armed and globally integrated, that extends to things like, long range fires and really an ability to arm our joint force to win from the seabed to cislunar space in every single domain in there. And I'll defer to the comptroller and to the secretary to talk about the particular elements, but the goal is the range and mix of capabilities that create outsized dilemmas for Xi Jinping and others that are out there to ensure that we maintain and sustain deterrence. Thank you.
Amen. Thank you. Second, the war between the U.S. and Iran reinforces an old lesson, which is that modern conflict comes down to attrition. China has been able to produce naval ships at a pace our industrial base can't match. The ships are not as large as ours, but quantity has a quality of its own. How are we postured for an economy of force in the Pacific, particularly if Taiwan is invaded?
Well, sir, channeling my inner Clausewitz, which is always something I try to remember, the big moving parts of warfighting. You know, we're not really doing economy of force work in the Pacific, as you alluded to, sir, and others have. It's our primary focus. And so on a daily, on a daily basis, we come to the Secretary with a range of military options across the world, so that he and the President can carefully consider those military actions and associated risks. It all comes back to the budgetary tools that you'll hopefully give us and the authorities to achieve those capabilities. And as we look, for example, at shipbuilding, which you talked about, I'm grateful for the work that the Navy is doing to scale that effort to ensure that we offer and continue to offer those range of options to our civilian leaders here in the United States.
Quickly to Epic Fury. Our fight with Iran has confirmed what defense planners had long warned about. Iran doesn't need a peer military to cause serious problems. Its playbook to cheap drones built from commercial parts, sea mines in contested straits, fast attack craft, and anti-ship missiles. The war also confirmed a harder lesson. Even with overwhelming firepower, the side that runs out of munitions or air defenses first loses. Are we, Mr. Secretary, are we secure in that point?
Absolutely. And we are winning, have won every component of what we fought in this conflict. Iran knows that based on the incredible degradation of their capabilities, and which is why we saw them wanting to come to the table. How this gets resolved will be on our terms, on President Trump's terms, and we have all the munitions and capabilities necessary to enable that.
Thank you. Yield back.
Thank you, gentlemen. Mr. Aguilar.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all for being here. Mr. Hurst, on April 29th, as you indicated to the ranking member, you said that the Iran war had cost $25 billion in total. You reaffirmed that today. Do you have any other updated costs or projections since that testimony that you've given? Outside reporting estimates have indicated that the war costs could be $1 billion a day. Do you have anything to share?
Yeah, thanks for the question, sir. So at the time of testimony in front of the ask, it was $25 billion. But the Joint Staff Team and the Comptroller Team are constantly looking at that estimate. And so now we think it's closer to 29. That's because of updated repair and replacement of equipment costs, and also just general operational costs to keep people in theater.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Mr. Secretary, when can you share more formal accounting on the cost of the war with Congress and with this committee?
We'll share what we can. I think we've updated on that number this morning, but when it's relevant and required, we will share it.
I think this would be the format that it would be required. Mr. Secretary, on that same day, April 29th, you testified that the current ceasefire meant that the 60-day calendar with the War Powers Resolution was paused. Who are the parties to the ceasefire?
Well, right now, we are in that same ceasefire as of right now.
That wasn't the question. Who are the parties to
It would
this?
be the United States and the regime in Iran.
How many pages is the ceasefire? What deal points? I'm not asking you to share the contents. I guess what I'm trying to ask is, how do we know that the ceasefire is active or not active without any documentation?
We know it's evident, and the ceasefire is in effect.
is it pages? Is it 15 points? There's been different points that have moved around. Is there any other, how do we know you just trust that the president knows that the ceasefire is active or not active?
As you know, for the most part, a ceasefire means the fire is ceasing, and we know that has occurred while negotiations occur, and there are lots of different discussions with our negotiating team that are happening. I'm there when those discussions are occurring, different drafts, different perspectives. So it's a very dynamic situation where a negotiated settlement could be the outcome here, where Iran does not have nuclear capabilities. And from the Department of War perspective, we're here to support those options.
On May 5th, you announced the launch of Project Freedom, which is a new exercise where CENTCOM will help coordinate ship traffic and guide commercial ships through the strait. President Trump then announced the operation concluded that evening. Now it seems that we may be revisiting that. Can you give us the latest on Project Freedom?
Well, as it pertains to battlefield options, we don't disclose those types of things, but ultimately, as the president stated publicly in his truth, at the request of the Pakistanis and given the options in the negotiation, it was paused, and it's an option we could always recommence should the commander-in-chief want us to.
Is the theory to create more ceasefires or more projects just to evade the War Powers Act?
The theory of the entire case is to prevent Iran from having a nuclear weapon. And if that has to be done kinetically and militarily, the Department of War is locked and loaded and ready to do that. If it happens through Project Freedom, where you move commerce through, if it happens through a negotiated deal, the president was very clear even yesterday. This is actually quite simple. Iran will never have a nuclear weapon one way or another. And we're here to support as one tool of the whole of government to make that happen.
General Kane, the depleted munitions have been a subject of some of the discussions that you've even heard here today. With respect to stockpiles that we have around the world, key regions like the Indo-Pacific and the Middle East, can you give us an update? What are you hearing from the combatant commands about their munitions status around the world?
Well, sir, we have sufficient munitions for what we're tasked to do right now. That's what I hear from the COCOMs. What I will say is I will always want more. So I appreciate the effort of this committee and the Congress. We're always going to want more munitions.
Secretary Hegseth, what are you doing to support the involved services to recap their losses?
We're submitting a $1.5 trillion budget that'll remake the department and ensure that every warfighter in the future has exactly what they need, and we're never in a fair fight. And I take issue with the characterization that munitions are depleted in a public forum. That's not true. And ultimately, we have all the munitions needed to execute what we need to execute, and we're going to ensure that we supercharge that going into the future.
I think you've heard differences from both sides of the aisle on that point. Yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, gentlemen. Judge Carter.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and welcome to each of you. We're glad you're here. Start off with something I'm concerned about. Mr. Secretary, my MilCon VA subcommittee is aware of living conditions of the 68W combat medic students at the Joint Base San Antonio. Frankly, they're very unacceptable and quite unlivable. As chairman of the MilCon committee, I'm deeply concerned there appears to be no imminent path forward to fix these issues. What actions is the department taking to improve these living conditions, ensure our soldiers receive safe and dignified housing, not now and not in the years to come? Our budget cannot fix that. It's not, we don't have enough money. You got all the money. What do you think about that?
First of all, let's fix that. Whatever unit that is, we want to know about it, and we're going to get a team out there right away to address it. And we've used discrete examples like that to find the gaps in why we're not getting at it on a more holistic fashion. Because we've came in on a huge deficit of maintenance on barracks and housing. This budget funds that, We're also going to pursue MILCON reform because in too many places, we're trying to build things around MILCON as opposed to using MILCON because MILCON is so bureaucratic and slow in its process. So we look forward to working with you to fix that, not just this discrete barracks issue, but where we found them, we fixed it, and then we've energized the system through a barracks task force to flow money exactly where it needs to go.
And I'm a champion of speeding up MILCON everywhere we can. And I've been out to Guam and some of those places, and we got a lot of needs out that way. I mean, and we're way beyond what our budget will sustain. But I have another question for you. I represent Fort Hood, the home of the 1st Air Cavalry Division Brigade, operating Apaches, Blackhawks, and Chinook helicopters. I'm concerned that the FY27 budget request does not support these programs, essentially zeroing out funding across the 3 platforms, despite the Army stating that we're going to use these aircraft and they will operate for decades to come. With that, the Chinook has no replacement for heavy lift mission. Now, will the department manage aviation modernization, and how will they do that without creating readiness problems and capability gaps in the future? Because the planned future lift is not like the Chinook.
Sir, I think it's a very fair point. I think it goes to the previous mindset of divest to invest. That was an austerity point of view that we inherited at our department. We've made some changes at the Army. We might have a slightly different view of the Army Transformation Initiative. Some of it is very good. There's a lot of goodness in there, but I think there are some things that assumed future platforms that may not be there yet. Take the Apache, for example, which our warfighters rely on and love. Take the Chinook, which is used all the time. We need to make sure we've got something there for it before you divest or we're not investing in that capability. So we look forward to reviewing that with you and ensuring that we don't have a gap.
Yeah, because the budget doesn't have anything, it zeroes out all 3 of those as far as we read it.
Well, then I'll take another look at that with our team.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, gentlemen. Mr. Case.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Hurst, what is the total replacement cost of the material that we have expended in Iran to date? By the way, by material, I refer to munitions. I refer to, planes, to drones, to stuff that we keep in our stockpile.
Yeah, I'll exclude military construction from this because we don't know what that's going to look like in the future, but I would say it's around $24 billion.
Okay.
Replacement and repair.
And that's through what date?
That's our current estimate.
Okay. I'm looking at a report in the public sphere from CSIS dated April 21st, which calculates estimated aggregate unit cost of 7 precision systems. So I'm talking, Tomahawk, JASSM, PRISM, SM-3, SM-6, THAAD, Patriot, those 7 at about $25 billion. Does that sound about right? I mean, you're projecting everything at about 23.
Yeah, I'm most confident in our projections on munitions costs. That's the easiest thing to calculate. So that number sounds a little high to me for that stage of the war.
Okay. We've lost about 39 aircraft, according to a report in the war zone, and that's an old one that's almost 1 month old. Do you have a replacement cost on all of those aircraft? Now, understanding that some of that aircraft is not replaceable, but presumably would have to replace it with some kind of capacity.
There are costs there, sir, but I want to get back to you in writing and what they specifically are, because as you can imagine, repair of aircraft is something that's very hard to calculate. We want to do a full diagnosis of the aircraft before we estimate that cost.
Okay, but that's not in your estimate of somewhere around 29 cost of war that you gave us.
That's included. That's what we have right now.
Oh, I see. That is part of it.
Yeah, but it's an estimate, especially for repair costs, and so that could change over time.
Okay. And you did talk about Milcon, which was a question that I had. Do you have any, because I mean, we've obviously suffered major damage to our infrastructure in the Middle East. You don't have a Milcon estimate yet?
We have a lot of unknowns there. We don't know what our future posture is going to be. We don't know how we construct those bases, and we don't know what part our allies or partners could pay into the Milcon cost. And so we don't have a good estimate for that at the time.
Okay. What about fuel? Is that a major calculation in your cost of war, fuel used, depletion of fuel reserves, replenishing that reserve?
We wrap that into our operations and maintenance costs.
Okay,
which is
that's a
included
no
in the
on that.
29. Mhm.
Okay, going to your FY '26 budget request, you've got procurement. Let's just focus on procurement because that's what we're talking about largely. You've got $413 billion, which in and of itself is an 84% increase over FY '20. I'm sorry, I'm in 27, 27 versus 26. And you have 38% of that total procurement request in reconciliation. Does that reconciliation request include anything from the war in Iran?
Obviously, we're buying things in the reconciliation requests that are being used in the Iran conflict, including munitions. There's over $40 billion in a munitions request and reconciliation, and so that would be part of the replacement.
Okay, so what I'm trying to get at is your reconciliation request in FY '27 related to Iran, or is it not related to Iran, or what's,
It's not,
is it all?
related. You know how long our budget generation process is and the appropriation cycle, and so
Correct.
we completed this before the Iran conflict.
Exactly. Okay, so what you're coming back to us with is not the the reconciliation is not about Iran. The reconciliation is about assumptions that were made before Iran.
It's about making a generational investment in the joint force and building military readiness. That's what
Okay.
the budget request is.
Okay. I'm going to get back to some of the questions that were asked earlier, which is, what is the assumption that you are making in terms of future reconciliation bills in future fiscal years? How much of this is loaded into this particular fiscal year? You had a big reconciliation last year, which was portrayed in the same light, and now you're coming back for a huge one this year. Is another one on the horizon next year then?
For our budget request for 28, we expect to request that as discretionary only. And I believe the top line for that is 1.23, which will be our request that year.
Okay, I yield back.
Thanks, gentlemen. Mr. Diaz-Balart.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, gentlemen, and more importantly, the folks that you lead. Federal government does a lot of important things, but nothing more important than what you all deal with. Let me get back to this hemisphere. I'm very, very grateful that the administration is finally really focused on the Western Hemisphere, and it's actually going to show. We're going to be able to show that it's saving American lives. But let me just to you, Mr. Secretary, let me throw a couple of points and see if you disagree with any of these. And let me talk about the one state sponsor of terrorism in the Western Hemisphere, which is the Cuban regime. Are you aware that they harbor terrorists and U.S. Fugitives from U.S. law? And we can just go through these really quick.
Yes,
All right.
yes, I am.
Is it true that the Cuban regime actually shot down 2 American airplanes in international airspace, murdering Americans?
I can't recall the precise year, but I believe that is the case.
Is it true that that Russian spy ships and warships, including the nuclear sub Kazan, have repeatedly used Cuban ports?
That is true, Congressman.
Is it true that the site of the Russian Signet complex in Lourdes has once again become a hub for Russian intelligence within Cuba?
Well, we've long been concerned that a foreign adversary using that kind of location that close to our shores is highly problematic. Yes.
And is it also true that now the Chinese also are there?
I wouldn't want to reveal anything that should be classified, but we don't want foreign adversaries attempting to use that island.
Well stated. Are you aware that, well, you're obviously aware that Cubans, intel people and military folks have been sent around the world because your folks confronted them in Venezuela. But are you also aware that according to Ukrainian intelligence, there are thousands of Cubans fighting for Russia in Ukraine?
I was not aware of that particular fact, but I am well aware that Cubans have been around the globe to include attempting to defend Maduro in Venezuela. So that is something they've done for a long time, yes.
You're also aware, Mr. Secretary, that, well, even stated by U.S. intelligence, even during the Biden administration, the Trump administration, the previous administration, the Obama administration, that Cuba has been designated as one of the 4 most advanced espionage operations against the United States, and that they share intel with other adversaries of the United States.
That all very much sounds right, sir.
And again, we're not in a classified setting. So I'm just considering all those issues and others that we could talk about in a classified setting. Do you believe that the Cuban regime possesses a national security threat to the United States?
I do.
Let me now focus on Iran, as I have a little bit of time left over. Mr. Secretary, you've been very clear what the goal is. But the goal that you're saying is not the goal that just this administration has had vis-a-vis Iran. It's been the goal of multiple presidents of the United States, right? Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. But I'd like to also ask you about Iran's offensive ballistic missiles and their offensive drones and their use of terrorism. Are those also issues that would be factors in a negotiated settlement with Iran? Because I don't have to tell you that there have been negotiations ad nauseum with Iran. The Iranians continue to cut deals, and yet they violate those deals. But it's interesting, in the nuclear deal that was cut with Iran during the Obama administration, missiles weren't even in part of that deal. As horrible as the deal was dealing with the nuclear issue, nor was terrorism. And I'm just hoping that those 2 issues, not only the nuclear deal, which is paramount, but offensive ballistic weapons, missiles, and we saw one that now has the capability of traveling rather far, and also their spread of terrorism. I hope that those also would be factors in any resolution to this issue in Iran, with Iran.
Well, sir, we're not the negotiating team, but I can tell you we have world-class negotiators. The core of it is the nuclear weapons issue. Those other factors are always a factor. Understanding that Iran has effectively tried to use the North Korea strategy with such overwhelming capabilities conventionally that no one would dare prevent them from pursuing a nuclear weapon. And it took President Trump to have the courage to make that historic decision. And hopefully we can get that across the finish line with negotiations, which are ongoing right now.
Mr. Chairman, my time is up. I yield back. Thank you, sir.
Thank the gentleman. Ms. Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Secretary, Undersecretary in general, thank you for being here. Secretary Hegseth, about 11 years ago, U.S. Air Force veteran Sergeant David Crete, who served at the Nevada Test and Training Range, realized for the first time that the health problems he'd been experiencing were not an isolated incident, but matched the health problems of many other veterans who had served alongside him at NITR. He was sitting in his backyard reconnecting with 8 of them and asked them, does anyone here have tumors? And 6 of 8 of them rose their hands and then proclaimed that even some of them had children with tumors. Dave, as it happens, had recently had a grape-sized tumor removed from his neck. 3 years ago, he came to Washington when the VA had refused to provide him the kind of benefits and coverage he had earned and which he needs from the VA because of his Department of Defense would not provide the agency with his records of his NITR service. I helped introduce a bill 2 years ago and have been fighting on his behalf ever since. What is most frustrating about this fight is not that the federal government doesn't recognize these health impacts of their service. In fact, Congress 26 years ago provided a law providing medical coverage and compensation for the Department of Energy employees who served in the very same location that Dave Crete and his colleagues had served in. Instead, their fight is against the Department of Defense red tape, which you have been committed to fighting. Thank you. You see, one of the only things standing between the toxic exposed veterans at NITR and comprehensive health coverage and benefits from the VA is documentation that the Department of Defense has that will prove that they served where they actually did. This documentation exists, and we're just waiting for the department to act. Every day that you delay in providing this information, another veteran and their family suffers unnecessarily. Last week, I had the opportunity to meet many of these veterans. 2 hours before I met them, one of them received a call from his oncologist informing him that he had multiple myeloma, an incurable blood cancer. Over the weekend, Dave was notified that 2 more of his cohort had recent deaths. The Invisible Enemy, which is an organization Dave founded, maintains a memorial list of those who worked at Knitter and have passed away. When Dave testified before the House Veterans Affairs Committee roundtable 13 months ago, 462 veterans were on this list. Today, that list includes 565 names. Just 1 year of inaction has led to 103 veterans passing without the care that they received, that they earned, and their family without the benefits. This list grows by an average of 1 every 2 days. Mr. Secretary, you have the authority to provide the VA with the documents they need today to get these veterans the help they need. These veterans have been waiting far too long. Can you please commit to me that you will be able to provide that list or that information as soon as possible so that these veterans can get the care and the benefits that they have rightfully earned?
Well, thank you for what you're doing for those folks. And I can certainly commit to you today that, my chief's right here. We will get a review for me as soon as early as next week, and I'll get back to you on what our department's position should be on that.
Okay, well, I first of all, we have the information. The Department of Energy has provided these benefits to the same cohort of people who've worked alongside them. We cannot wait for another review. I'm asking for your commitment.
I'm not talking about a full review. I'm just talking about a familiarization. So I understand exactly what you're talking about, wrap my arms around it, and then get you a response. It's not a situation I have all the facts on. I just want to
Okay.
get all the facts and understand it before I commit to something like that.
All right, I just, like I said, 1 person every 2 days, 1 veteran who has served this country is dying and their families are going without the benefits they've earned. I can't express how urgent this need is. I thank you for your immediate attention to this issue.
Thank you, gentlelady. Mr. Elzey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, General Kane, Jay, thank you all for being here. To all the staff sitting uncomfortably in very tight seats behind him, thanks for your dedication to our country. Master Chief Isom, you joined the Navy in 1987. Ronald Reagan was still president. You've been in uniform for 39 years. I'd like to thank you and your family for all the sacrifices that you've made. You're clearly the essential man. And I always want to point that out, that you've been serving in the Navy since I was a junior in high school. And so I'm very, very grateful. As we address $1.5 trillion request, I want to say I appreciate participating in the tabletop exercise at the Pentagon, and I encourage all my colleagues to attend and do that. It gives a very clear message on why we're asking, or you are asking for $1.5 trillion and how it's justified. As we move forward with contested logistics and as eventually this war in Iran will end, and the Indo-PACOM becomes the focus again, I'd like to see Congress fully fund the request for the Marine Corps McClellan-class LSM and the KC-130J for both the Navy and the Marine Corps. But the budget request breaks them up, and I'm not sure how you skin that cat. Moving to force protection and counter UAS, as we've seen in Iran, at nations that are somewhat far away from Iran, we've had a force protection and counter UAS issue as we've lost an E3 AWACS, which is worth $500 million when we bought it, but it's irreplaceable, and there are fewer of those than B-21s. I think we're seeing the reach of UASs affect us in a way that we probably didn't anticipate.
And we need to continue to use new companies that are developing new technologies to go after UASs. General, you addressed Karl von Clausewitz, so I'll use Sun Tzu as a counter. Even the finest sword plunged into salt water will eventually rust. And we deployed the USS Ford in June 24th of 2025. It's going on 11 months at sea. And as one of only two people in the room who have been on extended deployments on ships, myself and Master Chief Isom, I just want to point out, thanks to the families who are sacrificing, this is going to harm a lot of families. And as we realize that every conflict we've been in the last year has included the Ford, and it's been essential to our operations. It also points out the need for carriers, and I don't think 11 is enough, but also recognize that downrange, that's going to affect the availability and the readiness of our force going forward. So along with that, the capabilities that a sixth-generation fighter on the carrier are so important. As we've already seen, we've got the F-47. We're going to down select the F/A-XX later this summer. General Kane, can you address why having both of those is so important?
Well, first, sir, I want to echo your gratitude for the Ford. Yesterday, the air wing flew off, so we know that Oceana was a very happy place as those aviators fought through 800 feet broken to come up initial, as they should, after a record-setting deployment. So we welcome the Ford back. You know, my job, I won't comment on a particular program, but the job that I'm in now is to offer a range of options to include our ability to project power off CVNs of the future. So as our civilian leadership carefully considers that, I know that'll be in the mix if selected. And I know your colleagues in Virginia and in San Diego are all focused on the same, sir.
They're going to have similar capabilities, but I think as we switch to the Indo-PACOM region, that as we talk about first, second, third island chains, which for most of the American people doesn't really mean that much, but the ability to have a moving airfield in the Indo-PACOM when we know that the Chinese, our peer adversary, have a number of hypersonic weapons that are going to be aimed at fixed points, such as islands where our forces are. It's just extremely important that we recognize that that a moving aircraft carrier with unique capabilities, which obviously can't be addressed in a place like this, that can shoot from outside the range of the capabilities of our adversaries, is extremely important. I appreciate everything that y'all are doing. You are addressing an issue that hasn't been addressed in decades by asking for 1.5 trillion. It's a hard ask. It's going to be difficult for us to sell it, but I think it's absolutely essential for the defense of the United States, including a supplemental, which even people on my side of the aisle are saying they won't support. This is merely to refurbish and replenish that which we have expended in this conflict. It's absolutely essential for the defense of the United States, and the Chinese are watching. So thank you for all three of you and everybody in the room that works in this department. Thank you for what you do. I yield back.
Thank you, gentlemen. Mr. Morelli.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate this hearing, and thank you all for being here and for testifying. I just wanted to make a general observation, first of all. I do get the sense that sometimes people think that critical questions are unpatriotic, weak, or defeatist. I just want to say for the record, I don't think that's the truth. I think it's the opposite. And I appreciate, General Kane, you've mentioned civilian leadership and civilian control a number of times in your testimony this morning. We're the Congress. Civilian control that you have talked about begins and ends here, and that's the way the founders put in Article 1, responsibility for funding and for declarations of war are with the United States Congress. So I want to just mention that because I hear it all the time, and we are not in any way, when we ask critical questions, demeaning or in any way reducing our tremendous respect for the men and women of the military, the joint forces of the United States. So I feel like that needs to be said, and I appreciate the comments that you made, General Kane, about civilian control. Second, as it relates to mandatory spending versus discretionary, I think this is really important. This committee, the Appropriations Committee and the Defense Subcommittee, is given the responsibility by the Congress and by the American people to make sure that we have an appreciation for all the dollars, taxpayer dollars, that go into defending this nation. And questions, again, ought to be here. Transparency begins here. Oversight begins here, and mandatory spending avoids the responsibility this committee has to report to the American people on how our money is being spent. So I just, again, want to stress how important it is. I appreciate my friend Mr. Elsie's comments about the $1.5 trillion request. If it is so obvious to everyone and to the American people that that's the dollar amount we need, we ought not be going through this mandatory, discretionary, supplemental. Let's put it all on the table and let's make the case to the American people. We've now waited since February 28th is, by my count, 11 weeks, 74 days since hostilities began in Iran, and trying to get a reporting of the dollars that have been spent in this has been excruciating, and it's been long. I think General Washington reported quicker to the Continental Congress than this has been in terms of reports to the United States Congress. And I would just in the strongest terms urge that we move forward and give this committee a full reporting on what the cost of this endeavor has been. With that, I didn't want to make a quick, you mentioned something, Mr. Secretary, in your opening comments about private companies making private investments in our defense. I assume they're getting compensated for the investment. When you say private investment, are you suggesting companies are making investments for which they will not be compensated?
Yes, I am, Congressman.
Why would they do that?
Because we're turning it, it's the right question, because we've done it one way for years and years and gotten the same results. So this is changing the paradigm. Companies now know we're going to give them orders for 5 to 7 years on exclusive munitions in exchange for them paying for capitalization of their own plants. We used to pay for them to build their plants and then buy the munitions from them. So now, because they know they got consistent income.
But they are, no, I appreciate what you're saying. They're upfronting
The
primes.
primes are now paying for their own plants and equipment. That is a brand new paradigm. The taxpayer's not paying for it. That's $50 billion of value that you don't have to appropriate because the companies are paying for it themselves.
And the companies will not get compensated. They're going to make that as a charitable contribution to the United States government.
Their compensation is long lead times of munitions that they will produce and we will pay for in the future, but we don't have to build the
all right,
factory.
just to be clear.
This
yes,
is how private business
reclaiming my
works.
time.
They
I
have
just want to be clear. Wait,
build their
Mr.
own
Secretary,
factories.
I appreciate what you're saying, but let's be honest. They're going to get compensated. Look, I'm for that, and I appreciate what you're saying in terms of lead time and
Those are the deals that
dependability
have
and
been cut.
reliability of funding. But let's be clear. I want to switch topics if I can for a second. There's been much reported about the president's trip to China, and I appreciate again my colleagues who have raised Indo-PACOM and its defense. There are weapons sales which have been on hold that the president has not authorized to Taiwan, and I wonder if you could give me an update, either Mr. Secretary or General Kane, on what the status of those weapon sales are at this point.
I just want to say that the primes will be paying for those factories out of their own pocket, not the department's money or the taxpayers' money, which is a sea change, which is why I think this budget.
They're going to
is so
get a
historic.
return on their investment, which, by the way, this is
Which we
America.
welcome.
Well,
We welcome a return on investment. These are
yes, I
private
understand, but
businesses.
they're
We
not
want
paying
to
for it out of their pocket and not getting compensated. But anyway, could you answer my question about Taiwan?
Buildings
sales.
cost money. And if
Yeah,
we're giving them $2 billion to build the factory, that's taxpayer money. If they're using it out of their own hide, that's $2 billion saved for the American people that then we can appropriate toward munitions that we pay for in the future. Yeah, I know it's difficult to grasp.
It's not
But it's what
difficult to
happens when
grasp,
business
sir.
men take control of a department.
It's a different way of getting to the same place. You're going to pay for it. The United States, and look, we ought to. They're building things for us, but to suggest that somehow they're making an investment that they're not going to get compensated through sales is just, it's honestly kind of
But
ridiculous.
we used to pay for the building too, and then pay for the sales. And now we're paying for the sales, but not the building, which I think is a good.
And they're not
tool for the
embedding that in the
American
price
taxpayer.
of the things that they're selling to us.
The
The
price.
capitalization, the CapEx that they're putting into it, they're going to get back. Look, I don't know
They're
why
paying
we're
for
even
it.
arguing about it.
They're paying for it.
Could you answer my question about Taiwan arms
Well,
sales?
that's, the president's on the cusp of a trip and I'll be with him and he will make all the decisions related to that.
I
I
yield
think the
back.
gentleman's time has expired. Make a quick point. There is a change. The industrial base is putting money at risk with the expectation of orders, but there is no guarantee if, in fact, that particular product that they may make is not met or meet the standards in which we want to acquire it. And that is a significant change in what we've done in the past. Mr. Fleischman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Secretary. I commend those changes in the innovation to everyone on this panel, thank you for a job well done. Thank you for what you're doing for our country. This is truly incredible. So let me start with that. As chairman of the Energy and Water Subcommittee, I'm going to take a little bit different approach. I'm deeply involved in the recapitalization and modernization of our nation's nuclear deterrent. As we are recapitalizing the entire strategic nuclear arsenal, I remain concerned about the lack of options lower on the escalation ladder available to the president. In theater, non-strategic nuclear weapons have remained essential to the credibility of our extended deterrent commitment to NATO. I've got a couple of questions to ask, but I'm going to ask General Kane and Secretary Hegseth. What is your assessment of our non-strategic nuclear capability gaps in the Indo-Pacific and elsewhere? What additional tactical nuclear capabilities beyond SLICM-N should we consider that would be most useful for reassuring allies, deterring our adversaries, and providing combatant commands and useful options in the worst case event of a conflict?
We're, as you know, we're making a $2 billion investment, and you mentioned SLICM-N and in FY26. So we're investing in that. But I would say that a lot of that discussion would be classified given O plans in the Indo-Pacific. But Admiral Paparo, I would say there's no COCOM commander we have regular feedback with on what dilemmas we might need to create for an adversary than Admiral Paparo and Indo-PACOM to include everything that would deter any level of aggression. So I think there's a lot of sensitivity on this topic that doesn't lend itself to this environment, but very much so we're looking at all options.
Thank you. And I would also commend the Admiral Paparo. I mean, they're doing incredible work. Yes, sir, General.
Sir, I was just acknowledging the Secretary's comment about what forum we're in here today. You know, all three, and I appreciate the Congress's leadership, all three legs of the triad are undergoing modernization and all require that. And we're grateful for the assistance from the Congress. It's a bedrock to deterrence around the world and one that we want to maintain our focus on. I'll probably leave it at that and can come back if there's follow-up questions.
Thank you. And I would assure you, gentlemen, that in the Energy and Water Bill, which funds this, we will certainly address that in a very robust way, as I think the administration has. So I thank you all. As most of you know, in that bill, I'm probably the nation's strongest proponent, supporter of nuclear power in Congress. Nuclear propulsion has long provided a great United States Navy with significant operational advantages. There's been tremendous progress within your department accelerating the adoption of nuclear energy as a means of providing resilient and long-duration power generation for military installations and forward operations. I'm excited about the Army's Janus program, and the Air Force just announced the first 2 air bases to receive microreactors. My question, gentlemen, is can you walk us through how the department is thinking about the role of nuclear power across the joint force, including naval propulsion and the use of advanced reactors for base and expeditionary power? What operational advantage did you see these technologies providing, particularly in the Indo-Pacific? And what can we be doing to accelerate and expand these efforts?
Both incredibly important capabilities, microreactors and propulsion, whether you're looking at survivability, sustainability of basing and mobility within basing, and the expectation in the homeland or abroad that the lights are on and we can operate even if it's a contested environment. And then there's just no doubt you can't beat nuclear propulsion, especially as we've refined it over time. So I appreciate your efforts, and I think in this department you'll find a friend in ensuring we maximize that.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. General?
Sir, I'll just say that the Joint Staff has collaborated and continues to do so with all the combatant commands and services, the Secretary's team and office on OSW and the Congress to make sure that we're looking at the range of energy requirements that we're going to have and that we move from, frankly, in some cases, a reactive posture, no reaction into your nuclear point, but to a more proactive stance around how we're going to ensure energy sustainability in a range of situations that we could face. So we appreciate the chance to comment.
Thank you, General. And again, once again, I begin with profound thanks. I will end that way to all of y'all. I yield back.
Thank you. Thanks, gentlemen. Mr. Joyce.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you all for being here in Defense Secretary, War Secretary, excuse me, Hegseth. Godspeed on that project of changing our procurement process. America's at its finest when capitalism and capital markets allow free competition, and you get to purchase the best of all those ideas out there. Speaking of which, in June 2025, Ukraine's Operation Spiderweb, if you're familiar with it, destroyed and damaged dozens of Russian aircraft on the ground using low-cost, covertly infiltrated drones, demonstrated military installations are vulnerable to asymmetric drone attacks at a fraction of conventional strike costs. What steps is the department taking to protect our military bases from covert drone attacks, and do you need additional funding to safeguard those assets?
Well, I appreciate the question, and it's the battlefield trend, well, one of a handful that we are most closely tracking and investing in. $54 billion in defense autonomous warfare, recognition that every aspect of how we fight will be affected by technology and techniques and tactics like that one. And every environment more contested than it's ever been, and the ability to both go on offense and defense in that environment has to be something we're not just at parity with, but ahead of adversaries to ensure that we can create the kind of advantages we're used to having. And that's our job, is to ensure that we're looking around the corner. And so this investment in this budget, I don't know what it was, Jay, in FY26, but it was a small fraction of 54 billion. And we're even looking at DOG and metamorphosizing it, whether it's a joint task force into a sub-unified command. We're elevating this so we can push it through the services and ensure that it's not just something we do in an exquisite way, but it's how we fight at every echelon through the services. And that budget number is a reflection of that.
Well, you're getting attacked on a lot of fronts, Secretary Hegseth.
Can I just follow up? Would that be okay? One thing that I appreciate the partnership with the Congress on is, as we evolve from the warfighting mix that we have right now, the cost of precision and the cost of range is coming down. And so as we look at this budget, we look at the mix of capabilities that we're going to have. We talk about the agility in the defense industrial base and the national industrial base, the flexibility that we as teammates are going to have to ensure that we're not buying behind the technology development curve, but we're buying in front of it, is something that we look in the joint force to partner with, obviously OSW, but also the Congress on this, as technology moves really fast. Thank you.
No problem, sir. I just want to touch another angle that we're getting attacked at, unfortunately, and that's the cyber threats from adversaries like China, Russia, Iran, and criminal organizations, which continue to grow. The department's ability to defend critical networks and support their military operations depends on a strong and ready cyber workforce across all the services. At the same time, unfortunately, you're competing with the private sector, which can make recruiting and retaining qualified cyber personnel challenging. Can you give us an assessment of where the department's cyber workforce stands today and what investments Congress can make to help you make that better?
Appreciate that question. 20 billion in cyber offense and defense. I think the biggest change we've made across the joint force is full integration of cyber as a warfighting domain, which it was always an appendage or something you might do. And I think when you look at operations, Epic Fury, Absolute Resolve with Maduro, the capabilities, so much of that was enabled by unique cyber capabilities that we need to stay ahead on. And so this, recognizing future adversaries could have more capabilities and more sophistication, both on offense and defense, this funds it properly. And I think we put a commander in charge there who's in General Rudd, who is infusing a warfighting mindset into that place and ensuring we're competing not just inside the military, but also for the best civilian talent to come into cybercom as well.
Quite important. And Secretary Hegseth, I hate to keep picking on you, but the Collaborative Combat Aircraft Program is one of the department's most significant investments in this next generation autonomous power. Can you discuss how the department is approaching the integration of these autonomous aircraft alongside crewed platforms and how the program fits in your broader effort to field affordable mass and strengthen deterrence in the Indo-Pacific?
I can share some of it, but not all of it, because a lot of that is classified, but it is part of the future of how we will fight and a way in which we plan to stay far ahead of adversaries and create more dilemmas for them than I think they even imagine today.
Thank you very much. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank the gentleman. I recognize Ms. McCollum for any closing comments.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be submitting some questions for the record on behalf of Representative Capter. Last year, the president requested the first $1 trillion defense budget. Congress provided over $150 billion in reconciliation and $903 billion in discretionary spending. I continue, and I think you heard from many of us up here that mandatory funding for defense is not a great idea. We should avoid it at all costs. The budget request for this upcoming fiscal year has grown to $1.5 trillion. It's a 50% increase. But the department doesn't seem to have enough to cover its budget holes here in the department. I'm going to give you two examples. One is reprogramming. Just the National Guard alone has $600 million of reprogramming. None of their missions were budgeted for, and now we're being asked to, now you need to move money around. You're asking us to move money around to cover that. That was money that was approved for other purposes, so it creates a hole. The Army submitted a request to move nearly $1 billion around to fill personnel shortfalls. The Navy has $907 million hole and needs to cover for its personnel. So those are problems, and this is why we want things baked into the base bill. And then when it comes to the supplemental, the Iran war has cost Americans at least now, if I've got it right, Mr. Hurst, $29 billion to date, without a lot of things haven't been accounted for yet. And the department's requesting more money for munitions outside of the base budget. So bottom line, I want your takeaway message to be, I'm deeply concerned that the department can't seem to manage $1 trillion that Congress provided last year. So gentlemen, we need information. We mark our bill up on June 11th. And we need to be able to justify, to do our fiduciary responsibility to the taxpayers, any increased funding that you seek. So we expect the information that we've been asking for on munitions and supplemental requests as soon as possible.